Welcome back to another episode of the Cyber Queens. We are your hosts, Meryl, Erica, and Natalie. I'm Meryl Vernon, ethical hacker and resident red team expert.
I'm Erica Eakins, your technical salesperson.
I'm Natalie Baker, all things blue team.
And today we have a very special guest, Amber DeVilbiss. I'm so excited to have her on this episode. Amber, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Amber DeVilbiss. I'm a security advisor at GuidePoint Security, and I do a lot of other things as well. So I have a book and a nonprofit and all the fun stuff that goes with all that.
We have been so excited for this episode for so long. We're like, it's Amber Day! Amber Day is here! Yay! We're all big fans of your content, big fans of your book. My children have a copy. We read it at nighttime. So yes, loving everything you do. We will plug all of Amber's social channels and places where you can find her in the notes. Today's topic, we're talking about something that is just so fun and so near and dear to our little black hearts, which is as females in cyber and in tech, typically navigating being the diversity hire, right? Diversity is a big initiative. It's all sexy right now. Lots of companies are trying to catch up with their D&I initiatives and boards and stuff. And we as females often find ourselves as the only female in the room, which is why we started the podcast. But talking about that and how it works, how it feels, how you can navigate if you do find yourself in the situation where you're the token diversity hire on your team. All right. Spicy. So how many teams have you guys worked on where you're the only female?
Every team.
All of them.
All of them.
Every team until I built my own. And then after that, it's just been like uphill from there.
Oh, there you go. If you don't like the way your team looks, build your own. I love it. How about you?
Yeah, exactly. I would say, I got a little bit luckier. I think there's only been 1 or 2 teams where I was the only female. So that gets, it's been lucky for sure. It depends. Like if you would consider team the same, like Erica, you and I had worked together previously, right? So I was an SE and you were a sales engineer and you were an account executive, still are an awesome one. But nonetheless, we technically were a team, but my team, even then it still had female engineers. So I've been pretty lucky.
There was another female engineer because, sales is one, team and then the SEs are the other team, but you did actually have another female.
Oh yeah. I actually had like 3 or 4.
Oh
yeah. So. At Zoom, we had like 2 OffSec teams. We had the proper red team, and then we had like the AppSec team who does like most of like the fuzzing and testing the client and everything like that. And that team was huge. It was like 40 people, 40 pen testers, and there were a lot of girls on that team. I think there were like 30% female. So that was really nice to see. But on the red team, which was much smaller, only 8 people, I was the only female.
That's awesome.
And the most junior, of course. So
that's awesome.
It was awesome.
In sales for the last 12 years in cyber sales, I've been the only female on every team.
Well, and I think now at the level you're at, right? Like you're a territory manager, like it just kind of goes to show like how small the pool of females is like at the top, like in higher echelons of management and like of the organization. Like you get to a level where you find that most of your peers, the other team leads or the other territory managers are just mostly dudes.
It's true. It's very true. Yeah. There's not a lot of female sales management in frontline management. So I'm an enterprise account executive. I manage large accounts for those of you that don't know what that is, but there's literally not a lot of women in sales management. And if there are other women on the enterprise teams, they're in other regions of the country.
So how has typically being the only female that you find yourself surrounded with, how has that influenced your working style or how you prepare for your roles or just challenges that you've met? Like, tell us how you've navigated that. Let's start with Amber.
Oh man. I come from a military family, right? So there's a lot of thick skin building when you're young. My dad was always very realistic and was like, I want you to, when you get into IT, stay in it, right? Because you'll be a unicorn and there's going to be tons of people that have different terrible motives. And like, sometimes it's about navigating that and like using it to your advantage, right? But not in like a weird way, not in like the way that people assume, right? And so there's a lot of times where, folks will come in. How many times? I don't think as much with Erica, but I had another rep where I would show up right before she got there and the clients would be like, oh, are you bringing your engineer today? I'm like, I'm the engineer. Right. And they'd be like, oh, great. We're going to totally just like rake her over the coals. Right. And I would sit there and go like,
we can't wait for this.
Yeah. And I'm like a magnet for that. But I would always just kind of play dumb, because it's funny how many people want to, especially in security, how many people want to brag about like the things that they've built and how awesome their program is. And I'm just like, oh, really? That's so interesting. How does that work? And they just are like, oh, really? Like I get to feel amazing. And then I'm like, thank you, as I'm like walking away with everything possible. Right. And so it's like, people don't realize like how much information they give up when they think they're kind of like boasting. And for me, I kind of use that to my advantage, mostly because people kind of, like I said, assume I'm like the dumb girl in the room, right? That just doesn't know. And how did I become an engineer? There's no way I could possibly be one, that whole thing. So I think navigating that is not only understanding like that you're going to run into that, so you can like mentally prepare to kind of, route that as you go, but also finding a strong network of other women. And that's why I love what you guys are doing here too, right? Erica and I kind of latched onto each other when we first met, and we've been besties ever since. She's had my back, I've had hers, and we kind of just power through it together. We have tons of fun war stories from all this.
Yeah.
We do. I remember a particular instance when it was when we met, and she was my SE, my sales engineer. The company we worked at, I covered Nevada. And we went to a customer in Nevada, and it was about 6 or 7 guys. We walk in, it wasn't a government account. We walk in, I know you're laughing because you remember this, Amber. We walk in and they looked really dumbfounded. So they knew who I was because I had been talking to them. They knew I was, who I was, but they didn't realize that my engineer was a female. They were really, really confused when she started rattling off all these questions and technical things and just being awesome, that they were like, oh my gosh, we need to get our crap together. Do you remember that? That was one of our first meetings.
Yeah, I sure do.
Yeah. I will say sometimes it does require that low key flex. Like you're like, just so we're all on the same page, just so we can get this out of our systems. Like, let me just drop a bunch of bombs and demonstrate how much I know, so we can just move forward from the fact that I'm a girl sitting at this table with you guys. Like,
yeah,
I've been there. By the way, I swear to God, females in cyber talking smack at happy hour, we have way more fun than you gentlemen do. I'm not gonna lie. Our stories are better, and our revenge is better. Okay,
all around.
What about you, Natalie? Natalie, Miss Female Team SOC leader. What about you?
So coming from the SOC side of things, like I had a lot of times where like guys were like questioning my technical opinion, and I'm just like, all right, why do you need to be questioning my technical opinion? Like, I obviously know what I'm talking about. Like a couple episodes ago or a few episodes from now, I will be talking about this, where like I had a software engineer on a client call with me, and they were literally like asking me to just line through my script, what my script did. And I was like, well, my script fixes your script in this way, this way, this way. Like, I will just bring facts at them and be like, yeah, now if you want to question my technical opinion, I'm going to make you feel like an idiot for doing that. And that's really how I've navigated through it, is just being like, oh, yeah, you want to question my technical opinion? Okay, well, here you go. Here are the facts now.
Yeah. The first time I really encountered genuine opposition, not just like veneer, like just kind of being a jerk about it, but like legitimate work-related, performance-related opposition, especially on my technical experience, because I'm new, right? Like by all considered factors, I'm new. And at this time, I was only like 6 months new to pen testing. And I go in to deliver a report. I literally walk into the room, sit down at the table, and the guy goes, all of these findings are false positives. This doesn't reflect the environment at all. And I'm like, oh, why is that? And he's like, because we gave you a misconfigured like image to test. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, so they literally set me up for failure. And then they just, rather than tell me that in a meeting, like, oh, we realized we gave you the wrong base image, or we linked you the wrong thing or whatever, they chose to have the meeting anyway and to embarrass me in front of everybody. And I was like, well, going based on what you gave me and assuming that you follow your own documentation, this is actually the image that you're using to roll out to new assets. And these are all the things I found that are wrong with them. And they're like, they actually started calling me the boppy millennial chick in security in emails, which was stupid because I admin the DLP tool. Like I can see all these emails. And, it was just one of those things where they started like questioning my experience so bad. And specifically around AWS and the cloud, they're like, we don't know if you know, but the cloud is the internet. And I'm like, oh, Oh no, I was brilliant, you guys. So just to shut them up, I went and I started volunteering with the CIS group, the Center for Internet Security, who writes the benchmarks for various minimal levels of security for various platforms and technologies. And I joined the AWS community and I helped author the benchmark for AWS foundational security. And the next time we went into one of those meetings, I was like, I would like you to pull up the benchmark for cloud security. And I would like you to tell me whose name is on it. Is it yours? No, it's mine.
Yeah. That's crazy.
So that's like the low-key revenge that I saw at that time.
Yeah. Well, and it's nuts because then it's kind of like, and I've actually, I would say one thing to add to that really quick to the last thing I was mentioning was like having like female colleagues and people to help you out or whatever. But there were also like a lot of, when I was in a SOC, right, I had some of the SOC managers prior to me kind of took me under their wing and they were like, you're always going to get people that are just throwing out red herrings, right, to throw you off. And it absolutely has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So eventually over time, you need to start getting better at picking that out and then just saying, we'll get to that later. Right now, we're talking about this or we're here to discuss this, right? And so it's kind of like, it's a good one too, right? So there's like pluses and minuses for every side. But I feel like just like you, right, there's so many times where okay, really quick. This is why I'm terrified of public speaking. This story right here, right? You heard it first. So basically one day I was in a SOC, or I was in kind of like our, what do we call that? The war room, right? And this incident happened, blah, blah, blah. And this is kind of like right when I first started working there as a security analyst. And one of the guys writes up on the board, he's like, okay, source address is this, destination address is this. How can you tell which one is which though? And I was like, like I was listening. He's like, no, how can you? See, she doesn't even know. She shouldn't even be working here, blah, blah, blah. And like just publicly shamed me. And I was like, oh my God, now I have to be the smartest person in the room. And so I spent like all these years pretending to do that and then realized that's dumb. Like there's going to be people like this everywhere. And it's just like, like you said, like those guys that set you up, it's like, what was the point of that? And how much time did we waste? Right. So good for you for kind of calling that out too.
Yeah.
Those guys would have been gone out of my SOC.
Yeah.
We did not deal with that. I did not put up with that because I brought in 3 women on my team and I was like, you need to treat them just like you treat me. Yeah. Like if you're not going to treat them with the same level of respect that you expect to be treated with, expect the disrespect that's going to come your way.
Yeah.
And every guy I hired knew that.
Yeah. And it just speaks to how women are over preparers, right? Like we already think we're inadequate. Like we already won't apply. I'll apply for the job if we're missing even one thing on the job description. But then once we get there, like Amber said, like I have to be the smartest person in the room now. I have to learn it all. But you're never going to know it all in every audience that you encounter. Like my 20-year architect, my very first job, like he didn't even know some of the things that I knew. He was like, you teach me new things every day. I was like, you teach me new things every day. He was like, this is why it's beautiful. This is how it's supposed to work. And I was like, you're right. I can relax. And even if I am the smartest person in the room, I don't feel the need to flex that anymore. I'm like, I don't care what you think of me. I know I'm capable of doing my job and we're just here to get a job done.
Yeah.
Now, my question for you, Amber, is have you had guys that have thrown out acronyms and used them completely incorrectly? And then like literally you called them out on that? Like you had to call them out on that? Because I've had that happen.
Yeah. I don't know if it was, well, actually that has happened. Yeah. I think my parents always just taught me like my mom's number one thing, because she's also in IT and she's been in it for about 30 years. She's like, I hate when people use acronyms. The best thing you can do for everybody is to never use acronyms, right? And to like, especially because then there will be people in the room you kind of silo out and make feel stupid, like unknowingly, like, oh, CASB or whatever. And I never do that now. I'm like, CASB, what does that mean? Let's talk about what that means, right? And so even if people know it, you're not leaving out people that are way too shy like me to answer their hand and say, I'm too dumb. I don't know what that means, So I used to be like really fiery and like spicier when I was younger. And I would just kind of like call people stuff. And for some reason, now that I'm older, I'm like, okay, let's be like really approachable in our, delivery here. So
you're still spicy.
I am spicy, but usually not when people are wrong. Cause I, spent a decade always being wrong about things and having it called out. So now I know.
Yeah. You're not rude like that.
I do try to give people grace. And like, I will say being a mom has made me much more inclusive, but I used to be that little alpha Ravenclaw, just trying to like outsmart you at every, like, and I was like, why? I was like, that was so obnoxious. Why did I used to be like that? Like, I'm so grateful I'm not like that anymore, but I definitely, I can relate on multiple levels.
Yeah.
Well, so I want to share about how I navigated this because this is flat out wrong. Yes. So in sales, it is different. And, the technical side in sales, very different. I'm actually told that I'm being hired because they want to hire a woman. And they don't say it exactly like that, but it comes out in the interview processes. And then, so when I hear that, first of all, I really start looking into the company and I want to see if they're worth it, because sometimes you will use that you're a woman to get into a career. That doesn't mean that you're going to sleep your way to the top. That just means you are a gender and you're using that to get one step ahead. And that's not a problem. But when you blatantly tell me, yeah, we need some diversity, like, why? It doesn't just mean that it's a woman. So the way that I navigate this is I interview them back and I make sure that I'm not being hired just because I'm a female. I make sure I'm being hired for my skills. Now, how have I gotten as far as I've gotten? So a salesperson is just to go sell ice to an Eskimo, but that's not true. In cyber, most of the time you pick up some technical pieces. The way that I've gotten so far and so successful is when I'm hired into a company, I go right to my technical teams, my professional services, my customer experience teams, and I say, tell me everything like if I'm a 5-year-old. Like Amber and I went through this a couple times when she became my SE, and I would tell her, like, I'd tell her, explain this to me. And she'd be like, you don't need me to explain it to you because you already know what you're talking about. So I learn the tech because when I get in front of a customer, I'm really good at reading a room. So I can tell if they think I'm serious or not. But I learn things. So when I sit down, I sound like I know what I'm talking about. That's how I've navigated it, because 100% of the time they think I'm stupid. And I do play that role sometimes. And that's just unfortunate because cyber is just, that's how it is. So from somebody who's just not going right into a technical role, that's how I've gotten through it, because I'm able to talk the talk, and that's how I negotiate.
Right.
Well, and I think that's so important, because even with things like offensive security, like, it's not like cookie cutter. It's not like one size fits all. Like, just because I know how one org does it doesn't mean another org will do it differently. So like every time I come in, like, the worst thing you can do for your career in cyber, and this is a PSA to all of you out there, is to be the freaking know-it-all and to be like, I've already done this. I already know how it works. I already have all the answers. Like, don't do that. It's to come in and say, I know a lot about this, but let's pretend I don't, and I don't know what it means for you. Tell me how you would implement it so I can aid in that effort. That's our job at the end of the day.
Yes.
By the way, Erica, you mean you used your brain and you didn't just use your blonde hair and your big boobs to sleep your way to the top?
No, but that's what people assume of me. And I know people have assumed that of Amber and I, that we've gotten to where we are because we can't be smart because we're women. But it is pretty brutal because customers treat salespeople differently than they would treat the three of you. Being on the technical side, they respect you a lot more. But when I sit down and talk shop, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't be a jerk. But women are really good at sales because we get to a point where we learn like their whole entire life in the first meeting, first 10 minutes. Whereas guys, they try to talk shop and bull crap around. We have a very different style. So we need to use that, but that doesn't mean we're sleeping our way to the top or flirting. It's just a different type of relationship.
And here's the thing. I will say, coming from the technical side of it, the salespeople who really took the time to get to know the tech that they were selling, they were way more successful. They were pulling in the right customers. They knew how to market to those customers better. Like, they knew how to go out and build those relationships that were long-standing and then pull them in and say, oh, well, here's an upsell, how we can help you here and here and here. And like, here's where we won't help you at because you don't need our help here. And those are always the salespeople that I've always respected the most, because they're the ones that have always come to me, ask me questions after question after question. They're like, I'm so sorry, I'm being annoying. And I'm like, no, I love to give you the information so that you don't always need to pull me into that meeting. And I can actually do what I need to do while you do what you need to do.
Yeah, don't make yourself a bottleneck for expertise either. Like, information share, for sure.
Yes, and you didn't sleep your way to the top.
You know what? With my career, because I'm like still 3 years new, people automatically assume I like went to a con, slept with somebody, flirted with somebody, and that's how I got my next promotion or job offer. They're like, there's no way you made it this far, this fast, unless you were doing that. And I'm like,
did they ever say that to you, though? Did they ever?
Yeah.
Mine's out there for everyone to see because it's on my TikToks. I actually like respond to them now because you can take somebody's comment and make a video about the comment and respond to it. So I do that all the time. But yeah, there's so many people that will literally just say that. I mean, I had one of the gals who runs the Lyft Women in Security. She was, her and I were together one night and she was like, no way they say that. And I showed her and she was like, I'm so pissed right now. And she's like, I'm going to create a TikTok just to get on there and just like, whatever. So I don't know. It's kind of crazy. But again, it's like something I've been dealing with for a long time. I know a lot of us have. So at some point you become desensitized to it somewhat. And that, it's not the best thing ever, but I mean, it's kind of like taking Tylenol when your leg's broken. Like, yeah, you should probably go get it fixed. But for now, right, that works. So just I think like knowing that it happens. And like I said, finding other people that can help you navigate it. I think that's a big part of this.
It was the kind of thing I always thought was like an inherent bias, like just built into how people think and act. It was never something I had been bluntly had like presented to me until I was stopped at DEFCON in a lobby of the Mandalay Bay. And I was wearing a hot pink suit because it's Vegas. Mm-hmm. Where else are you going to wear a hot pink suit? But it was like, I was fully covered. It was a business suit. And someone literally said the words out loud to me. And I was like, is this actually happening? Do you really go to other people and say those words to their face? Like, I was like, I just can't believe that people still say this in real life in 2022. Like, it blew my mind a bit. I kind of buffer overflowed. I was like, you're almost too stupid for me to like address your comments. I can't. So it does. It definitely does happen to me in real life. Absolutely. And it's sad. But let's bring it full circle. So we do encounter these things. Unfortunately, sometimes you will be the diversity hire, and sometimes they don't even mean it to be a bad thing. Like I had a manager tell me once, because I've always been the only female on my offensive team, like when you leave, I want to replace you with a female because, we'd like, and I was like, you're not going to replace me with a female just because she's female. You're going to replace me with someone who can do this job. If she happens to be female, great. But let's bring that back to Gen Z. Why is this important to them? How does this need to change? If you are, albeit, going to start diversifying somewhere, some women are going to have to be the first. And we know we're going to be the first diversity hires. What are your recommendations? Why is this important? How should companies be changing? Amber, we'll start with you.
Okay. So are you saying why is it important for companies for Gen Z, or are we talking to Gen Z now? Yeah. So I think, Gen Z, and I actually have a funny TikTok that's coming out soon, pending guys. But it's going to be about kind of the different generational players in the same jobs, right? So like what a Gen Z SOC manager looks like, right? Versus like a boomer, if we want to put it that way.
I love that.
So I think Gen Z, right? There's a lot going on with like impatience, of course, right? I feel like I have younger sisters and I also have a 10-year-old son. So it's kind of like in between those ages, right? It's like they want things now. They have no patience for anything. They're a little bit entitled, right? Because nobody's told them to sit down for a second. And then also they also do things for like social causes. And so now we're seeing a lot more, girls who code, right? So Doja Cat kind of helped carry that thing further out than I think anybody expected it to do. Right. And so now we've got, all these girls of color, we've got, transgender kiddos, we've got, girls in general that are coming up. And so it's kind of like a lot of Gen Zers are, asking like, hey, what are you guys doing about this? Like, how do you guys, what's your culture like? Right. Like, that's like the most important question I feel like everyone should ask anyway in an interview is like really asking about culture, like not saying what's your culture like, because everyone's going to be like, it's wonderful, come work here, please. Like, don't look back there, don't worry about what's going on back there, just right. But asking questions like, how do you support your people, or what parts of the community are you guys involved in, or what's your value system, like what makes a great worker here, right? And you can really tell I've asked these questions and I thought it was stupid, right? I read an article. I'm like, of course, everyone's going to give their best answer. You would be shocked at how many people answer honestly. And they're like, well, I expect them to work 14 hours a day, right? And I expect this and I expect that. And if you're not, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, like you better be good at your job, but like all this stuff. And it was kind of like, I can't imagine you saying that to a Gen Zer, right? And having them go, oh, that sounds great. I totally want to work here. Like, I just feel like it's a different generation to cater to in general. And as much as it's pulling out hair sometimes for a lot of folks who are, like older, right? That are like, hey, we do things a certain way. You have to go through this because I had to go through this when I was your age and you're lucky to be here, right? But it's kind of like, hey, let's realize that the times are a-changing, right? And how can we kind of grow with that instead of fight against it as we kind of move forward together? So I think just being more aware, like more socially aware of what's going on is going to be pretty key for these companies.
That's great advice.
Okay. So I actually read an article about how like the military is having a really hard time recruiting Gen Z because the military is not diverse enough and it's just like fake diversity. And it was really interesting to me is like our number one like power source of like making sure that things are running the way they need to run is having this issue. And Gen Z just is not going to stand for not having diversity, but they're also not going to stand for being the diversity hire either. Like they want to have earned the position because they deserve to be there, not because they had to feel like they had to be scratching and clawing their whole entire way up through. So like they will be more appreciative of the opportunities that they're given, but they don't want to have to ever doubt that you maybe only put them there because they're a woman, or you only put them there because they're a minority, or because they fit some sort of check box for you.
Yeah. And the companies that jump on the bandwagon and just do it because they're jumping on a bandwagon, the Gen Zers are going to call you out on that. But here's a positive note. So Gen Z coming into cyber itself is where you want to be to flourish and be innovative and be who you are, because tech companies are so progressive. Now, you will find tech companies that say they're going to do this, this, and this, and they really don't do it. They're just saying it because they want to be, they want to appeal to Gen Z. But you can figure that out when you go and interview with a company or you go and research them. If they say they're diverse, but they have only one color on their entire executive board, which is middle-aged white men, ask about that. What are you doing to change that? And most companies will answer you for that. But with all of these things that you guys aren't going to put up, it's also the place that you need to come to have to flourish and to be who you are as Gen Zers.
Yeah, I think that's like a big one too, right? They kind of want to be special, but not because they individually want to be special, right? Because they've earned it and they want the recognition and they're going to put in the work. It's funny. I was reading an article the other day about this, and it said that they are the next great generation, right? So they are the next one, right? And that's kind of if they can get their entitlement in check. And I don't know if it's so much as entitlement as it is, kind of, I feel like when you're almost having to fight or defend something that's seemingly normal to you, it comes off as aggressive. So it comes off or as extreme, right? So in this case, the extreme version would be entitlement, right? When really it's just, hey, I want to be heard. I understand you guys do things a certain way. Can we be more open-minded, right? And then you have all the people on the other side. They're like, no, like this and this is how we do it here. This is how you're going to do it, right? And they're just like, no, that's not how I'm going to do it, right? And it's just kind of like this never-ending back and forth. But I think this is a good talk, right? Because it's like, how can we get both sides to kind of just chill out a little bit on the whole thing and go, how can we help each other? How can we kind of keep those same like moral work values, but also have an open mind to the fact that, maybe this newer generation has good ideas to bring to the table too. So
collaboration.
Collaboration.
That's really what they want.
And we do have an episode where we talk about Gen Z, specifically strengths and weaknesses. And we had a Gen Zer on. Don't come at us in the comments. We had a Gen Zer on to talk about. She knows she's in the trenches with that. No, I'm kidding. We do identify certain things that make them a little combative, but we identify certain things about their mindsets and their capabilities that are going to make them so powerful for the industry. But those are all great points. Like you pretty much echoed the whole episode. It's right here. You need to listen to episode 8. It's right there. But I think it's just so important to remember that like, as much as like, we would like to see diversity be something that's baked in and like in the fabric of everyday cybersecurity, it is still new and there are still companies figuring it out. And even if they're figuring it out wrong, at least they're taking the initiative and the effort to like put time and energy into diversity. And I love that for them. I would just say though, that like, keep in mind, some of us are going to have to be the first trans, the first LGBTQ, the first, Asian, African American, Pacific Islander, Native American, like whatever it is that you've got, some of us will have to be the first. And it is important to keep in mind that like, if you are, how you present yourself and how you communicate with your peers laterally and vertically is really going to matter for everyone who comes after you. They're kind of like taking a chance, like they're trying it out. And you need to show them that this was a good idea. It was a good investment and convince them to scale it more, essentially. So every time I want to go off on somebody or I do encounter something toxic, I'm like, I have to remember that like I am representing all the women right now in this moment that you're going to encounter for the rest of your working career. And I want you to treat us differently, which is why I try to convert them and not necessarily just to fight them. But I think this has all just been such sage, amazing advice.
But Gen Z, like Amber said, they are entitled. It is a little bit of entitlement and just they're demanding because they're not going to settle for less. Gen Zers, you do have to realize when you're being when you're crossing that line, you have to, if you want collaboration from companies, you're going to have to collaborate with them as well, because like Meryl said, they are figuring it out. And if they're trying, why don't you get on their D&I board or try to give them, do interviews with them and give them advice, because that's how we're going to, evolve and learn. And it's still an issue, but I do want to go back to one more point. If you are being hired because you're a woman, it's your first job in tech, think about turning that down, because it might be your break getting into cyber, because it is difficult to get into cyber if you don't know people and you don't know the ropes. Don't be so offended if you get some inkling that you're being hired because you're a woman or a minority, but just dig into it a little bit. Make sure you're being hired because you're the right person. But sometimes, like I said earlier, you got to use that booster. That's how I got my first sales job in cyber. I was a woman.
Oh yeah. The fact that me and Natalie are women and vets, it's like, oh, we're knocking off 2 demographic diversities with one person. This is excellent. I leaned into that a little bit. I relied on it to get my foot in the door because it's hard to break into this industry. That's a thing. But that is really good advice, Erica.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be you drive your career forward. Like, you have to have another driving point behind it. Like, you can't just drive it off of being a woman or being a veteran or any of that. Like, you have to drive it off of being awesome.
Something you could do to qualify those is to ask them, do you have a lot of turnover in this position? Like, did my predecessors leave for some kind of cultural or temporal reason? Or is it just that I'm the first because, you've only hired recommendations from people and they've just all been buddies and they've all been like, you can get to the bottom of it in the interview and find out, like, have a lot of women bailed on this company, or have you just not encountered a woman you thought could take care of it yet?
Yeah, because you're eventually going to have to work and show your skills. But here's a question that I have for Amber. So Amber mentioned this a few times, that she does TikTok. She's actually a TikTok star in our world and kind of like getting out there. So I know you talk about that you respond to these comments, but still to this day, and I've seen it, I know that you are treated differently, or somebody might look at you differently, and that you got to where you are because you're a woman. How would you respond to that today versus when you first started in the industry? How have you evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first started, it was, talk about, not turning down jobs, right? I pretty much took every job. I did all the crappy ones nobody wanted to do. And I was fine with that because I had a goal in mind, right? And I always knew, good or bad, I always knew it was more of a stepping stone, right? So, yeah. And so I think, in the beginning, it almost was, I remember calling my parents, right? So I worked at a cybersecurity company based out of Chicago. They're in Denver, or they are now, but they were at the time too. They just started. And I remember calling my dad and I was like, I think that they only want to hire me because I'm a girl, right? It wasn't even a woman at the time. It was like, because I'm a girl. And he was like, good, get in the door. He was like, who cares about your feelings right now? Just do it, because this is like your break, right? Typical military dad. I was like, okay, that sounds great. And so I didn't even pay attention to it. I'm sure I had all that stuff happening around me. And it's funny because, we talk about how I'm on the technical side, but I am more recently on the sales side. And all the stuff that, Erica and I have talked about that she's gone through since we've worked together being on the sales side is so much more toxic than anything I dealt with on a technical team, right? I feel like when you're in the technical side, unless it's like leadership or people who are a little bit more further removed from the objective at hand, right? It's kind of like, engineers all the time are like, all right, that's great. I don't care. Whatever. You're awesome. You're a woman. That's great. That's you being a woman is the last thing on my list for why I like working with you. Right. And those are the real ones. But then you have kind of the higher ups that are like, oh, well, and she's a woman. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. I think, like I said, I think I don't get as mad about it now because I realize that, companies are trying to move towards this whole, like, let's get, up to 50% of women in the cyber workforce by whatever, 2025 or something like that, I think were the numbers. And so it's like, you got to kind of, like, change doesn't happen smoothly ever, especially when it's going to be global. And so I think, like you said, telling Gen Zers, like, just be a little bit more patient, right? They're just like boomers need to be more patient, or whoever else needs to be more patient. We're all kind of being more patient together. I think it is a matter of realizing, though, like, if you're in the position to where you are being told by your friends or coworkers or whoever to just be more patient, like, you already have the upper hand, you know what I mean? Because everyone else is like scrambling, trying to figure out how to handle you. And that's honestly the best place to be, because like you said earlier, right, you're setting the example for everybody else. I actually just had a call with Erica a couple weeks ago. And I remember I went to a conference and there was like just a ton of things that happened. And I actually, right before that, I also went to like a quarterly business review. I never have to say it out loud. We usually just use the acronym, QBR. And I remember there was a new hire and he just sat down at this table and just like went, wow. And I was like, what's up? And he's like, so you're an engineer. And I was like, mm-hmm. And he goes, really? Are you, like, how though? And I was like, well, let's see. I applied for this job. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like kind of like leaning into it a little bit because I could tell he was like just absolutely wasted anyway. And I was like, okay, we'll have fun with this one. This will be great. Right. And I was like, yeah, just keep, putting your foot in your mouth. This is perfect. And I didn't really have to even do anything. Right. It was kind of like, and it was kind of like, I just kind of like, oh yeah, that's interesting that you think that. It's funny because I actually am here to be that punching bag, right? For people like you that just cannot seem to wrap their head around the fact that I'm a woman sitting in front of you doing the same job. How weird, right? And it was kind of like, and I told Erica too, it's like on my TikToks, like, I'm actually happy being the punching bag for things because I know that at the end of the day, as stupid as people think I am, I also know that I'm helping people in the industry that are trying to break in, that are like, until you did this, like, I had no idea that I could even have a job like this, right? Like, thank you for putting yourself out there. Thank you for showing us all these videos. Like, I like the humor, I like the sarcasm, but I also like the fact that you're doing this because I see all of the haters and I see all of these awful comments, but you just still keep doing that, right? And it's like, yeah, because actually I get, like, this is the spicy part of me. I love when there are haters because I know that I'm ruining somebody else's day, like, mentally.
Yes.
Right? Just by doing what I'm doing. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Yes. Like, I love my little hater fans. It's perfect because they're always there without doubt. So
yeah, I'm like, to all the haters leaving hate comments, that's engagement and we love you for it. Thank you. You're boosting us in the algorithm.
I'm like known to say that on my TikToks. Like, thank you for increasing my view count. Like, now this will like push me up to the top. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yep. Love that for me.
Yep.
No, this has been awesome. God, I wish this episode would never end. Unfortunately, though, we do have to wrap it up. So we're gonna bring it around to final takeaways. So final takeaways on being the diversity hire, navigating that, hiring for talent. Anything that's on your brain that you'd like to leave the audience with, go. And we will save Amber for last because I put her on the spot a lot today already. So we'll start with Erica or Natalie. One of the queens, go first.
I will say that whenever I've talked to someone else who's coming in from like my interns on up through the analysts that I've hired that are women, I've always told them, let your work ethic speak for itself. Like, because your work ethic is going to drive what other people think about you and to say about you anyway. Let that speak for itself. And don't worry about the people who hate on you as much as like just letting your work ethic speak for itself. Because at a certain point, what those people say about you, it's going to conflict with what other people know about you already.
Love that.
It's great.
Love it.
My final takeaway would be to do your research, Gen Z. When you're coming to this field and you figure out what you want to do, pen tester, security analyst, SOC manager, start researching the companies, the target companies you want to work for, understand how they operate, and then start applying. And when you go to interview, you know more about the company than sometimes the person that's interviewing you, and you're going to shine. That's one way to navigate the diversity hire. The other way is just to be natural, be yourself, and you're always going to get through it. And there will be haters.
There will be haters. You will encounter them everywhere, which brings me to my final takeaway. Thank you for that. Lovely little segue, Erica, which is to try and be unbothered. I know that we as females, I'm actually not a very emotional female. I'm more logic driven, but as females, we are largely more emotional than men. We tend to take a lot of things to heart. So all I will say is like, let the haters hate, let people talk, let them call you the boppy millennial chicken security. Just be unbothered, move through your day, slay as you would, achieve as you would, and who cares what they think about it? Don't let people tell you to calm down, and don't let other people determine your rate of success, but try as much as you can to be unbothered, because you will shine and they will look petty. And that's the biggest flex you can have on somebody like that.
Preach. Yeah. Amber, your final takeaway?
Yeah, I would probably say, as cliche as this is, I would say, you know, be the change you wish to see, because I feel like we are all, like you said, setting examples in this industry. So it's up to you to kind of like, don't even give attention when people are like, oh, just be like, what's up? Like, you're like almost, you know, everyone else is the weird one. You're just doing your thing and it's normal. And I think the more we normalize everything, the better this change is going to go for the rest of us. So, and to feed off of what Erica said earlier, right? Be yourself. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to change who I was to fit a job, just to find a new job where I didn't have to do all that crap anyway. So be yourself. The right career will find you. You will be right where you're meant to be at the end of all of it. So
I love that. Couldn't have ended on a better note. Amber, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We have had so much fun. This episode was everything I wanted it to be. You absolutely delivered on all the things I thought you would.
Thank you all so much.
We were so happy to have you here.
Yeah, so excited to be on.
Last things for Amber, anything you want to plug, any upcoming appearances, events? I know you haven't gotten to talk about Lyft very much. If you'd like to talk about that org that I know that you founded.
Yep, co-founded. Yep. So Lyft Women's Security, we're based out of Colorado. So we are always looking for every lady, every girl to join. So I have some stuff going on. I'll send out, I think you guys are actually sending out the link and stuff for that. Yep. Also my kids' cybersecurity book, and more importantly, TeachKidsTech, which is my nonprofit for kiddos.
I'll link all of that.
Yeah.
All of that will be linked for you guys. If you are curious to get involved, find out more, reach out to Amber, I guess, with any of your questions, follow-ups about her initiatives, her products, her services, or any of her TikToks, which I watch on the daily. So wonderful. Right? Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We were so happy to have you back. Please like, share, subscribe if you loved any of the content that you've seen up until now. And if you do not, please tell us so we can change it. We respond to every email and every comment personally. One of the three queens does. So with that, we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.